Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. Welcome to another of our weekly studies. In today's video, I'm going to go over a little bit more general explanation of exactly how I recommend that students start or begin the study process and as you move through each chapter. Just keep in mind that for the most part, if you're familiar with certain elements of fitness, health, wellness, even something as specific as human movement, biomechanics, kinesiology, if you've gone to school for it, or you haven't gone to school for it, you know nothing about it. You're coming at this cold, and the only real experience you have with anything related to the materials in a textbook is through you just working out, reading stuff on the internet, and educating yourself on some of those basic principles. Not a problem. I've been getting a lot of questions from students asking, how do I start studying? Now, we have videos that are specific to that topic, but I thought it'd be a good idea today to take a step back and reiterate some of the more salient points that go into understanding the study process. And I've had some students actually ask, could you literally show us using a pen, whatever, how I would actually do it? So yeah, absolutely. I want to show you pretty much what I do when it comes to studying. If you've watched any of our videos, you'll know I always kind of pull out, a pad, pencil, paper, markers, anything that's going to help me with memorization. Why? Because I'll say it over and over and over, probably until the day I am 6 feet under, which is that studying, okay, starts with, for the most part, memorizing material. You have to memorize. Learning, the studying process all comes down to one basic thing: is you've got to memorize information. It's the memorizing of information that allows you to then to take that knowledge, that information that you got stored in your gray matter, and pull it out and use it. Now, in some cases, what you're using or what you're using it for is to simply pass an exam. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and many people also say it, is that the vast majority of the information that you get in here, you're not going to use it in the real world. Some of it you'll use at some point, maybe some of it you'll never use. Honestly, I've never used probably 3/4 of the stuff that I've read in here, and I've been doing this a long time. Point is that you got to pass the exam, and so I'm not negating the importance of the material. I'm sure there's at some point you might use some of the material, but you get the idea that you're not trying to memorize and learn so that you can actually use this to train people. If you can utilize the information in some way, shape, or form with actually training people in the personal training world, then good, okay? But more than likely, you're memorizing information to be used on a test. Does that make sense? Okay. You're utilizing specific knowledge points within this textbook so that you can pull it back out of your brain when you're looking to answer a question on a test. So that the next step is you answer enough questions correct. Boom, now you're NASM certified, and that's great. Now you can go out and start training people, and you're going to learn real quick that there's a lot more to personal training than literally every single textbook in every single NCCA accredited organization. A lot more to it. Simply things that you cannot learn from a textbook. Okay, so I want to make sure that I reiterate, you're doing this very specific reason. And again, I get students asking me all the time, yeah, but I don't just want to memorize it and not use it. Well, I don't know what to tell you then, because like I say, for the most part, you're not using most of this stuff. And especially if you're in a small group setting. Remember, for the most part, NCCA accredited organizations like NASM, ACE, ACSM, and SCA, they're all functionally information based for or on one-on-one training. Okay. And if you do one-on-one training, sure, this will be a lot more helpful than, for instance, when we talk about group training, right? 3, 4, 5 people at a time. There's nothing wrong with one-on-one training. In fact, that's how I did it for years. So the point here is that I want to help you to memorize the information. At some point, Once you get certified, use whatever you're going to use. And none of it, by the way, most of the material in here is correct. It's not like anything is wrong. Now, just understand something, that there are points of contention in some of this material that is no longer kind of jiving with some of the new research. But hey, that's science, folks. That's the way it works, is that sometimes we learn things and they're not correct, or sometimes things will change, such as the blood pressure chart. Just as a for instance, if you have the 6th edition or the 5th edition of NASM, if you're looking at old material from 2, 3, 4 years ago, it's changed. Why? Because the blood pressure specifications are different. Okay, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Please don't feel like you're losing something if the science changes. Certain things don't change. A lot of things will change. And so if you stay focused, right? If you stay focused on the fact that this textbook is probably already outdated, as we always say in academia, as soon as the textbook comes out and gets in front of you, it's already outdated. A lot of the material never changes. Anatomy, physiology, for the most part, it's the same today as it was 10 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. For the most part, very few things change. It's the other reason why, don't get upset, that NASM does changes their editions. I wouldn't be surprised if their 8th, this is their 7th edition, if their 8th edition is already being written, because guess what? As I went through the 7th edition, I was actually going, whoa, wait a minute, got a little problem here. And I call them up and I tell my rep, look, you may want to recheck this. Okay. And then they look and they go, oh, crap. Right. And once they get enough incorrect material showing up then they go and they look at the research, and then they've got to do an 8th edition. And so just keep that in mind as we go through this. I know I'm talking a lot as it's sort of an introduction, but the point is I want to make sure when a student enters into this arena, your main focus, your main goal is to memorize enough of the material so that when you take a practice exams, do them over and over. Again, practice exam is probably the best thing that you can do after you've gone through the material. Once you pass the test, okay, now it's a juggling act. How much will you use? How much don't you use? What's the scenario that you find yourself in? An online coach, online trainer, one-on-one, small group. And so that's my introduction. And I hope just that part of it is of benefit to you. Every once in a while, I got to kind of take a step back and give kind of a general overview of what the point here is when it comes to studying for an exam such as the NASM CPT. Okay, so you'll notice I've got my textbook. Now, honestly, I've got the textbook online, so I can open it up in my computer and I can look at it and I can grab. And if you've seen other videos, I will, cut and paste a picture that I can have here. I'll throw it on a PowerPoint presentation. But today I wanted to show you specifically what I actually do when I sit down to study, because at the end of the day, that's what you need to be able to do. You can watch a video all you want and listen and go, wow, that's pretty cool, but you need to follow along. So in one sense, I want you to sit right beside me right now. Okay. Open up your textbook. If you don't have your textbook, then you got to use the one online, if that's what you got. I'm old school. Obviously, I'm old and I'm old school. I like books. I like physical textbooks. Not that I don't use online textbooks all the time. Through all graduate studies and all those things, I've used online textbooks, right? But in this case, I'd like to have my 7th edition in front of me. Whatever are the resources you've purchased from NASM, use them. But here is the meat and potatoes of studying. And I've had a couple of students ask me about chapter 7, and that's why I'm open to page 189. So before you do anything else, get your textbook out. Get a notepad. I'll wait. Get your notepad, get a pen or pencil, pen. Get some colored pencils, markers. Get them in front of you. Close your door, block out the rest of the world, give yourself 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however long you got, okay? And get your focus on, okay? Because that's what you have to do when it comes to studying this material. My suggestion is that you go through the entire, you do what's known as a perusal of the textbook. And I know some people, that is brutal for some folks, but honestly, it's one of the best. If you've got the time, peruse it, just page by page, read through it. Stop trying to memorize through the perusal. You should be able to get through the perusal in a short period of time. Okay. An hour or two, really. Well, I shouldn't give you a time frame. Some of you read slower than others. And so that's just the nature of the beast. One other tip, if you're an audiological learner and you like to watch videos and listen, the perusal part of this strategy is a perfect time to do your audio. Okay. I'm just kind of throwing some tips out at you. And so I got my phone. Okay. And I put it on my recorder, or of course I've got my microphone, and I would start in chapter 1, the modern state of health and fitness. Now, if you don't want to create your own audio where you can listen back, then don't do this. You just read through it. But if you're one of those individuals that was, and I've seen it past couple of weeks, hey, does NASM have an audio book? Does somebody have an audio book? I'd love to. Okay. I don't know. You can look for them. Of course, we have one, but you'd have to purchase it. So don't worry about that unless you want to, and you don't mind listening to my voice. 23 chapters. Do it yourself. Open up your audio. Okay. Doesn't have to be perfect audio. And then start reading. Welcome to NASM. We live in an increasingly automated society that requires less. And I'll be honest with you, I blast right through this stuff. Evidence-based practice, and I'm recording myself, the focus on science, and I just do a perusal and I go through. A perusal means that I am pretty much speaking or reading as fast as I'm speaking through this. I am not trying to memorize anything, and I'm not going to spend any time on the figures. I'm reading this, I get through this. Another really important tip on the perusal component, when you get to the end of the chapter review, read that. Chapter highlights, read those pieces of information. Read your chapter review, read your chapter highlights. For those of you that don't want to do the entire chapter reading, if you're going to do one audio component for yourself that you can listen to or re-listen to, it would be the chapter review and the chapter highlights, because that's just giving you this general information. Because remember, that's not where you're studying. That's not the studying component. Studying component is when you get down and dirty into it, but this can help you on your drive to work and you can listen to it. How do I know this? Because I've got enough students that tell me, thank goodness I did the audio. I just simply wanted to, and some folks would actually put it on their phone with the videos, right? The chapter by chapter videos that we have. And they would just close their phone down and at least they would get the audio component of it. They didn't have to watch me go through it. So there you go. When it comes to that little tip, let me get back to chapter 7 and show you, we'll give you an idea. Now, remember, this works for every chapter. Works for every chapter. But remember, this is a weekly study and I'm kind of rehashing some things for you. I wanted to give you some basics on exactly how you would physically go about studying. And again, there are other videos that we have done that speak to this. Chapter 6 is cardiorespiratory. Why am I doing chapter 7? Because, boy, once you get to chapter 7, just so you guys know, this is what I studied in college. So for me, I love it. Human movement system. Holy cow, the HMS. It's great stuff. Introduction to human movement science. Now, follow along. This is what I do as soon as I hit a chapter. Okay. Got some coffee. If you ain't using this, just turn the video off now because it's not going to help you. Read it and rewrite it. I don't care what your learning style is. You do want to know learning style because that gears you towards one way of capturing information and negotiating it academically. But everybody, I don't care if you're a tactile learner, visual, it doesn't matter at all. It really doesn't. Not when it comes to taking the information and doing the most important thing. First things first, read it and then rewrite it. My tip for you this week is to start off with the, look what they did for you. They gave you these large letters, these chapter headings, right? And each one of them then contains these in blue, at least in my textbook, it's in blue, and gives you a definition on the side. I mean, they can't make it any easier for you when it comes to actually memorizing material. So what I do is I'll take chapter 7, human movement science, and there's a ton in here. I mean, there is a ton of information, folks. Ton of information, all captured in that little bit right there, okay? You don't have to do the learning objectives. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write down intro to human movement science. And you'll see what I'm doing. Intro. I know what you're saying. I don't have time for this. I'm taking my test in 3 weeks. I don't know what to tell you, okay? If you're taking your test in 3 weeks, chapter 7 is probably not one of the highest priority chapters. I'm just using it as an example. There's other chapters in here. There's about 5 or 6 off the top of my head, at least 5, probably 6 or 7 if you go into our study manual, our study guide, that are high priority. You got 3 weeks, those are the ones you study. Don't even look at chapters 1 and chapter 2. You go directly to those chapters. That's all you have. You're blasting through those over and over and over, and then you're taking the practice exams, okay? But if you have the requisite amount of time, 2 months, 3 months, somewhere around there, this is how you're going to do it. Intro, I'm going to write that down. Intro to human HMS, human movement science. Okay, y'all see that? That's what I'm doing this for. I'm going to write it down. It slows me down. Now watch, I'm not going to read through it first. I'm going to look at all my chapter headings. Okay, so intro, now go to page 190 and write down biomechanics. Biomechanics. The next subheading is biomechanical terminology. Write that down. Write down biomechanical terminology because it's a heading or it's a subheading title, okay? Write that down. Underneath biomechanical terminology, I'm going to, right, you can almost do it like, remember how you used to do it in high school, middle school, right? A, B, and then this would be subheading, subheading 1, right? So biomechanical terminology, anatomical locations, I write that down. I hope you're timing me because I am literally I'm literally going through this first phase of writing down my heading titles, planes of motion, axes, planes of motions. You can see what I'm doing. Okay. I wrote down the heading. Don't make fun of my handwriting. Okay. I'm trying to get this out of the light so you can see it, right? Biomechanical terminology, and underneath biomechanical terminology, the anatomical, blah, blah, blah. I'm doing shorthand, but you would write out the entire thing. Planes of motion, axes, joint motions. And then planes of motion, joint motion. So right there, now you have another right? Another indentation subheading that goes under planes of motion, axes, and joint motions. And that's going to be the sagittal plane. Write it down, sagittal plane. Okay, don't go through it yet. The frontal plane, right? The frontal plane. See what I'm doing? The sagittal plane, the frontal plane. See how I'm writing this down? Next page, I'm not going to read through it yet. Transverse plane, and I'm writing that down. And by the way, pause the video if you need to. That's all. But follow along. You're sitting next to me. Imagine you're sitting next to me and you're doing exactly what I'm doing. Transverse plane, don't do anything yet. Scapular motion. So we had, think about this, we had planes of motion, axis, and joint motions. Scapular motion goes back under that subheading. Scapular motion. I write that down. Don't worry about the pictures. Movement attributes. I'm going to write that down. I'm going back to I'm going back now to muscle actions. The way NASM did this for you is that they give you these chapter headings, subheadings, subheadings in different font and different colors. Match them up on your sheet. muscle actions, isotonic, and then I'm going to write eccentric, concentric. And by doing this, you're putting this into a logical sequential knowledge base. And that's what they've done for you. Concentric back off into isometric, isokinetic, and then the muscle action spectrum. Are you timing me? You see how long this is taking? It's taking a couple of minutes. I do this with every chapter. Functional anatomy. Now I'm at another intro to human movement science. Now functional anatomy of muscles. Muscles as movers is the next subheading. And I'm simply going to write down agonist, synergist, stabilizer. I'm writing it down. Don't try to memorize that yet. Go to page 204, open versus closed chain movements. I write it down. Closed chain movements. I write that down. See, what some of you are doing is you're starting from the beginning and you're reading, and then you're reading through and you're trying to memorize, and you've got no context for the material or information. When you do it this way, at least you're giving yourself some sort of context for where the material fits in with each other. That's why we have headings, subheadings, sub-subheadings, and then the material itself. Open chain movements, you'll know that that will be in line with closed chain movements, open chain movements. Now you back off again, you'll get to muscular force, length, tension, relationships. And I know I've seen it 1,000 times. It's like you throw your hands up and go, I'll never memorize this. Well, not if you don't get in there and actually do it. That's the point, is don't get frustrated. If you get frustrated, then you're not studying in line with your predominant learning style. That's why you got to get this stuff written down first. Get it down, then you can start to study in a way that's more appropriate to whether you're visual, audiological, kinesthetic. Length, tension, relationship, muscle balance, and I'm right. See all the headings. Stretch shortening cycle. I go through the entire chapter. Okay. And just so you know, for me, it's going to fill up just the headings alone is going to fill up one, probably the back of that page, maybe even going into the second page. You get that? I'm at the end of the chapter, 222. My last subheading was external feedback. Okay, so I got that and I wrote that down. Believe it or not, by just writing that down, you've given your brain some context now. Remember, it's exposure to material over and over and over that helps the human brain take information, put it into short-term memory, and then move it into sort of medium, moderate, and longer-term memory scenarios. Okay, but it's exposure to it over and over and over. And that's what you got to keep in mind. So now all I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of bring this video to a close so I don't go over too much. But now I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to be able to, you're going to hate me for this, and it always happens, but all that stuff that I wrote down had one purpose. It had one purpose. It wasn't for me to reread what I wrote down. Reading is not studying unless you are like the 0.001% of the population that has a photographic memory. If that's the case, turn the video off, read the book, and go take the exam. Literally take you 4 hours. I don't know many people like that. That was what I just wrote. And this is what kills people, students, is when I show them this. Yet ironically enough, and this is what I wanted to show you. See all these pads? Can you see all those? See? These are the tools of studying. Be honest with you. These are the tools of studying, folks, right here. Better to spend a couple of bucks on a ton of these and just go through this over. That's why I always sort of have this out of reach. But anytime I'm trying to learn something, it's exposure to the material over and over and over. I've got stuff here that, for instance, on some microbiome stuff I'm working on. just going to write it over and over until quite honestly, I get sick of it and I can't not remember it. Well, wouldn't that be nice with this material? Okay. So again, you did that, get rid of it. You don't need it anymore. It was the physicality of writing that information down. Now, what do? You do the same thing, but now you take it into the next level. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use NASM's own study strategies to start memorizing the information. And they've given you that by putting specific terms as definitions over in the sidebar for you, right? And they've already done that. There's a lot more to this, but I hope that that gives, for those of you that are just getting right back on track, some of you are just really frustrated, and I get that. And it's like you get into chapter 7, some of these other chapters, and in fact, I just saw a post today. The student said, "I'm in chapter 7. I don't even know what I don't know." Okay, well, that's profound, but true. The answer is you probably don't know much of this, but that's okay. Again, memorizing it is going to give you a little bit better satisfaction that you can actually memorize the material just enough to answer the questions on the test. Your next step, last thing, I won't say your last step. Your next step in this scenario is to then just write down the terminology. And again, this is why we say it takes, a couple of months for the most part to get through all this material. Okay. And so now I'm going to use an entire pad, probably, if not 1 or 2 pads, just for this chapter alone. Why? Because I'm going to write down, look on page 189 with me. You've got 2 definitions on the sidebar, and I'm going to write those down. Human movement system, the HMS, the collective components and structures that work together to move the body. Okay, components that work together. I'm going to summarize it just so you know. You don't have to write out the whole thing, but I'm going to summarize the definition. This way I know what they're talking about. Because when they ask a question, and I've seen questions like this, particularly in accurate practice exams, where they'll say the system in the body that, collective components and structures, blah, blah, blah. And you'll remember, oh, that's right. That's the HMS, human movement system. Boom, you'll get that one correct. Kinetic chain, same thing. And then all I'm doing at this point, the next step, is I'm going over and trying to memorize these terms, concepts that NASM has put in the sidebar. I know what some of you are saying, but Doug, I don't just want to memorize it. Well, no, that's not what memorization is for. Memorization is so that you can now utilize it for something. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of information in here that you can probably easily use in your workouts tomorrow. Absolutely. But if you can't memorize the information, if you can't walk into your workout or work into a workout with your client with that stuff in here, well, then what was the point? You can go back to your book and look, but the idea again is that we're using this to pass your exam, pass that test. This is going to be a very effective way to start it. It takes time, ladies and gentlemen, it takes time. I don't know what else to tell you. And it takes work. And your hand, yes, your hand should be cramped up. Okay. That's just the way it goes. Don't know what else to tell you. You would go through the chapter just like that. I'm writing and just memorize. And after a while, it's really, really pretty simple. I can't not know this stuff anymore. Lastly, what you might want to do at that point, depending on how much time you have, is now go through your tables. And I've spoken about this as well beforehand. I'm not going to get into the specific of actual tables. I have other videos that we've done that speak to those directly. You got to get the broad strategy down, folks. You got to get this general broad strategy of what are you going to do today at 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. when it's time to study. See, because that's the big issue. That's the big issue, isn't it? You get frustrated and you really just don't know how to even start. And so you don't even know when you sit down what you're doing and you get frustrated and then you go and you watch TV. Why? Because it's so frustrating. No, it's really simple. Broad outline for you is to sit down, get your book, bump. I use colored markers quite a bit. Even sometimes just to break up the monotony of writing, I'll use a colored marker or a colored pen or something, or even a colored pencil to give some visual. I'm a visual type of person. And so I'll use that to change up visual acuity issues. I get very focused on one pen, blue ink, this font, which is my handwriting, and now I can change it up. Okay, so that was a general overview of the basic study techniques. And if you have questions, now here's the deal. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this is because when we ask people if we can help, we want to know how we can help you. We want to make sure that it's concepts, ideas, issues inside the textbook that we can get into and just hit the meat and potatoes on it. So if you don't know, or you want to know more about autogenic inhibition, just as an example, put that in the comments. Yeah, let us know. When the posts and the questions are about, I'm taking my test in a week, or I'm taking my test in 3 months and I don't know what to do, can anybody help me? There it is. That's what we're giving you. But in the comments, whether you're viewing this in the Facebook page or the YouTube channel, in the comments, tell us specifically, very specifically. Look, teachers, educators like myself, what we love more than anything else is to be given a specific question on page 297 in table blah, blah, blah. It said this. Can you explain that? Or there's an inconsistency here and with this, right? Or on this exam question, I got da, 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 da. Those are the ways that we really can get down to the, where the rubber meets the road to help you out. But look, go ahead and subscribe. If you haven't done so already, you can hit the bell so that you can know when the material comes out. Generally, it's every Saturday morning, Eastern Standard Time at 8 a.m. You see these videos come out on both our Facebook page inside the private NASM study group, also on our YouTube channel, Body Design University. We're here to help you. I mean, that's kind of the goal. Help you to pass the exam on the first attempt, if it's your first time at it, or the second, or wherever you are at. If you're struggling to figure out the study, then let me know specifically in the comments below. Anything else we can help you with when it comes to dealing with the NASM 7th edition, passing the CPT exam. That's what we're here for. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.